Hey there, church. This is Pastor Lucas with our Bible study video as we continue this series on the book of Genesis. It's been fun over the last few weeks to be able to do this. It feels like it's been a year, but it's only been like a month that we've been reading through Genesis, and we're going to finish up here in the next couple of weeks. But it's been really fun, even when we were separated from each other, doing with the snow and the ice and everything, just knowing that there was a group of us that were reading through a very similar text every morning or night or every day whenever we read it. It's just a beautiful thing to get to do, and I hope that these videos have been helpful for you as well as you read through some of the more difficult passages of the book of Genesis, and today is one of those, especially as we look at the rape of Dinah, which starts in chapter 33 and goes into chapter 34. It is a difficult story to read because we find out that we know Jacob has 12 sons that become the 12 sons of Israel, and we're going to talk more about them on Sundays and things like that in the upcoming weeks. But we also know that he has daughters. I mean, there's lots of kids that they have at this time, and yet this is one that gets named. One that gets a name, one that gets a story, and it's kind of weird that this story exists, and it makes you wonder why it's there, because there's also very little, if any, mention of it later on in Scripture. Nobody ever talks about it again. Nobody ever really wants to mention it, and it doesn't really connect to anything that happened before, nor does it connect with anything that happens after. And so it makes you wonder. Scholars have wondered on if this story was added in for a specific reason. If the story why was this story included, and many other stories about Jacob and his sons may not have been included. But it's there, it's in Scripture, and we got to do something with it. And so that's what these videos are hoping, us talking through this difficult stuff a little bit better. And so we start to see that at the very end of chapter 33, we see how Jacob buys a plot of land from a man named Hamor. That's the way I'm going to say his name, Hamor, Hamor. And it's in this new land, this area of Canaan, that they are new to. Jacob and his family are new to, and so they're just trying to be good new neighbors, and they find a plot of land to live on, and they buy that plot of land from somebody, and so they're being good neighborly people. And Dinah, one of Leah's daughters, goes and she wants to explore the new land, explore the people. And we hear that when she goes out to see the people, the prince of the land, the actual son of Hamor, Shechem is his name, lies with Dinah with force, is what the language is in the version that I read this morning. But it was something it means rape in that way, right? But then it also leaves this very weird language afterwards, right? That includes how Shechem has great love for Dinah. This is the same words that he uses to describe Dinah after this interaction that he has with her are the same words that are used a lot of other places in Scripture that really means genuine love, right? Unlike in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, when we talked about that one a few weeks ago, where we heard that they wanted to lie with the men, and there was nothing about love whatsoever in that story. It was all hatred, all anger, all force, all of that. This story has a lot of that language of love in it from Shechem especially. And so it's just kind of weird to walk that fine line of what it might be. But ultimately, this is not something that should be done. This is not just for the sake of the rape, but also the fact that they are two different people groups. They are two different families, two different people groups, and intermixing among those people was not looked highly upon then either. And so they are trying to figure out how they might be able to reconcile this problem with each other. And so the fathers end up meeting, and they start to have a conversation about what does it look like. And this is in chapter 34, that they start to figure out what does it look like for us to try to find commonality here, find a way forward through this. It was believed at that time that even if there was something as bad as this, something as bad as a rape, especially with a woman that had never been with a man before, it was an opportunity, like they were to marry her even if they were not wanted to, anything like that, so that she wouldn't bring shame upon any other part of the family, or that she would be protected and cared for the rest of her life. So they're trying to figure out a way to make this happen into the future. And so the sons of Jacob, we hear starting in verse 13, they come up with this deceitful plan. They say, ooh, we don't know if we can ever do this, if we can ever intermix with this group of people. But if you all circumcise yourselves, then maybe our two families can commingle. Then after that, if you guys will do this, then we will think about maybe doing that. And so it's this really weird thing of like, is this all that it takes? This is a very common conversation that goes on throughout the rest of Scripture about this sign of the faith. This is something that Paul talks about greatly in his letters on does it matter if they're circumcised or not, if they're followers of Jesus and those sorts of things. But it's a physical sign of their collective identity, but it's also the infliction of pain on what is, in this case, the offending appendage. That was one thing that I read in commentary, which kind of made me chuckle to read out loud. And now I just said it out loud as well. But this is not the last time that the people of God will use a religious practice to bring about violence to a people. If we think about the history of Christianity and the ways that we have used force, that we have used aggression, that we have used the idea of transformation in very ill will against people and people groups, especially ones that are different than our own, to try to assimilate them into a particular way of life. Christianity does not have the greatest report card when it comes to being good neighbors to our friends out in the world. And so it's just an interesting thing that the men hammers, family hammers sons, like all of them decide to hear this word, to hear this idea of hey, if we all get circumcised, they'll we'll figure out a way forward through this, and they agree to it. And so they go back to their town, and all the men decide to get circumcised. And on the third day, we hear in verse 25, on the third day, which for us Christian people know that is a very specific, that something important is about to happen. Whenever we hear that in Scripture, that on the third day, this is what occurs. We hear that Simeon and Levi, the brothers of Dinah, go and kill every man in this city. And they take their sister back. So at this point, their sister wasn't back with them. She was like being held hostage in this town. And they take their sister back and they kill everybody in sight. And the other brothers come in after them and start pillaging and plundering. And they take the herds and the wealth and the children and the women of this town for themselves. And while only one man actually defiled their sister, the sins of the one are felt by the many, that the whole town has to pay for the sin that one commits. Jacob, obviously, the father of all of these children at work in this story, is very upset when he hears the story end. He is upset about the vengeance because he knows that they don't stand a chance against the other tribes, that if they were to mount up and come after them, that there's no way that they would survive. And so he cares more about safety of the whole family than he does about the safety of his own daughter, and his sons call him out for it. The last words of this story in chapter 33, 34, at the end of chapter 34 in verse 31, the brothers say, yeah, but was she like selling out their sister as a prostitute or a whore, depending on the translation that you use? There's wild language used in this story. And so it's a really powerful thing to read, and for the brothers to stand up for their sister like this. It makes us, it's a difficult story to read, but it's a very heartwarming. I don't want to use that word lightly, but to see these brothers stand up for their sister, to call out their dad of saying hey, this is your own daughter that was doing this, and you're going to sell her out just for the sake of peace in between these two tribes, was something that they would not stand for. And so it's this really weird moral dilemma that Jacob finds himself in this, at the end of this story, of this question of, is this the right thing to do or is it not? Did the brothers respond in a moral way? Probably we wouldn't say that, since they ended up killing all of these people, but at the same time they were protecting their family, they were protecting their own, which is a very difficult thing to wrap our minds around. And so this text lends itself, and when I said earlier on in this video of how it doesn't really connect to anything that happens afterwards, it doesn't really connect to anything that happened before, why does it exist? It's a very powerful story to read, though. When we start, it shows us it is almost a turning point, because Jacob doesn't say a lot following this story in the rest of the book of Genesis. The story starts to transition from Jacob being the main character to his children. And ultimately, we see in this story how his children are that Jacob has no control over their decisions and their well-being and the choices and consequences that come with those choices have in it. And so it almost is a turning point for us as it starts to transition us to the story of Jacob and Joseph. Joseph, one of his youngest kids, and the coat of many colors, what I'm preaching on Sunday. It's a really starts to transition the story that we're going to see of how the brothers interact with Joseph as well, similarly to the ways that they've interacted with their sister. Very deceitful, very vengeful, very angry sort of guys. And so it starts to make this transition to show that like these characters that are at work in this story are not the greatest of people to follow. And so we're going to see how that plays out. And so again, it's a very difficult story to have in our scriptures. It's a very difficult one to see what we might be able to glean from. Where's the grace? Where's the love? Where is God shining through? God's name, God's language. God never speaks. God's maybe not even present in this story. In regards to like, there's lots of other angels and presences of God within the book of Genesis, but there's no mention of God in this story whatsoever. And so it's a difficult thing to read, but it's one that we have. And so we have to figure out what to do with it, and we have to figure out how to reconcile it. And so hopefully it was something that just talking through it with you guys, some of my wonderings and sees the ways that I interpret it might open it up for you to have a little bit more grace with this passage as well. So we'll do one more of these as we are doing this, finishing up this book of Genesis series next week. So we will see you then. Peace.